Ancestors, we come to you today around this sacred fire named State of the World Forum. We remember again our original instructions of time. We enter now into the Uli, the turnaround time, a place we go to in darkness and come back refreshed with ideas. But this moment is not only a moment in our consciousness, this is a moment in our reality, in our natural world, in the mountaintops. In a time of great change, humanity has become instinctual, filled with fear, sensing a change we cannot control, we do not possess. But deep in our genes, in the stellar makeup of our DNA, our RNA, our ancestral lines, there is a knowing, the time, the calling, the dark space, the lack of boundaries, the fear, something more than me, something more than we, something of light. We look now to the south, the time of the red star, a time of catastrophe, a time of shaking, a time of terror, a time of correctness, a time of moving about in our hearts and in our minds and coming to our truth. Look to the mountains, the elders tell us. Look to the mountains, snow-covered, pure, clean, the realm of the ancestors, but wait, something more, a pulse, a movement. The shining ones, the star beings, they're here. According to all native beliefs, the time would come when the doorways of light open, and there is great danger, not only to the earth, but to us, to our families, to the people, to all life. The difference between creativity and absolute devastation is choice. May we embrace the light in all of its gradations, from the brightest, bluest, purest white, holy light, to the darkest, blackest, holy light of Mother Earth. Let us open to this time with awareness that the knowledge that we need, the knowledge that we be, the knowledge that will become is now, and it's here, and it's us in this gathering. All my relations. Amen.
Thank you, Grandmother Apela. I'm Dr. Anita Sanchez. I'm Nawa, Aztec, Toltec, and Latina. I invite you to listen with the softest part of your ears and expanding heart as we come together from many parts of the world. And as you I ask you to take a moment to honor the first peoples of the land where you live, the original caretakers who have tended the earth, the waters, and the spirit of place since time immemorial. If you don't yet know who they are, please find out. Learn their stories. Listen and build connection, relationship, rooted in respect, reciprocity, and gratitude. May we all walk softer upon the earth. Walk softer as if we are kissing our first mother. We are honored to have grandmother's blessings from the four directions. Grandmother Pat McCabe, woman still standing, Dene, USA. And then there'll be grandmother Helen Lindmark, Sami, Sweden. And then next grandmother Rutendo Ngara, South Africa. And last but not least, we'll have many more grandmothers. Grandmother Kahontakwas, Diane Longboat, Mohawk, Canada. I invite you again to listen with the softest part of your ears and an expanding heart.
Yat Pene. I reach out to you at this time, holy people to the east, place of the new beginning, the place of the dawn, the place of illumination, the place of the first medicine, this holy water. Tro, miniwa chozane wakan. I want to say thank you for this holy gift of life. Thank you for giving us everything we need to take care of everyone that we love. I thank this Holy Mother Earth for her beauty, for her creativity, for her wisdom, for her strength, for her radical abundance, and for her fearless generosity. And I want to say thank you for all my relations here too, the flying ones, the swimming ones, the creepy crawly ones, the four-legged ones, the standing nation, the trees, the stones, the holy mountains, all that makes up our family that is bound together by this one right here. We say this is our not only life, but this one is alive. So I want to ask that this one take a good look, that everyone that is gathered here, take a good look at the intention for which we are gathered and for which we will gather for the next days. The five-fingered ones are presenting themselves here. And so we present ourselves at this moment to the east, to that east door, that place where the new can arrive, the place where we announce that we are here to receive what all of that spiritual help would bestow upon us, what all that life force from the cosmos, that wisdom, that intelligence, that guidance, that alliance from the cosmos would bring here to us. So we acknowledge that holy gate. And I ask at this time, at this place, as we face this direction of new beginning, that you give us ease in our heart, that, we as the five-fingered ones have come to a place to believe that we control everything, that we make everything, that we control all of destiny for all life. But our old people say that this is not the case. The old people of cultures all over the world still carry the memory that we are the children and we are a part of an intelligence that is far greater than us. And so at this moment, I ask that you help us to have some kind of peace and solace in our hearts, to rest in the beauty, in the power, the strength, the wisdom of life itself, herself. And so we invite you, holy medicine from the East, to join us and to be with us throughout this conversation. We make a place for you in our midst. For all my relations, Hoshanahastli, 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 Hoshanahastli.
I'm Grandmother Helen, and I come with a blessing from the south. I come with the blessing with the wind, the air, the unseen that is beyond the beyond. And just want us to take a moment to put our hand on our heart and take a deep breath and feel that I am the one who are holding your life. I am the one who are there for you. And I am the voice that unites all life, the great bridge between the heart of Mother Earth and the sky. I come here to bless this gathering. I come here to deeply embrace you, to be present with you, and to really embrace the gratitude of the breath of life. The first breath we take and the last sea we take that hold us. To remembering that we are one. We are one. We are in these creations. But if we look, the ancestor has been walking. They have been traveling through the air, from the beginning of the beginning. And through that, we have shared the living atmosphere of our destiny, shared destiny. So I ask you today to just listen, not only with your ears, but yet with your breath, to feel in it, embody it and feel it. We are living in a time that are very difficult. It's moving fast. But just to take a moment of being and breathing and really feeling into what is the true connection that is been there since the beginning of the beginning. I carry the memories. I carry the memories of the forest. I carry the memories of the mountains. I carry the memories of the breath of the ocean and of the wind. Let the world, when you speak today, let the words travel like the wind as a prayer. Let the action of your movement become the rhythm of life itself. So where it's heaviness, I come and I bring movement. Where it's confusion, I come with clarity. Where there is separation, I come with remembrance of one breath share. So let this forum be hold and be remembering of all creators, all living beings that have been here from the beginning. And let this breath cleanse all the fears and just opening the space of listening. May this conversation be flowing like the most gentle wind, and let the decisions be as a breath of life, carrying it and connecting and healing and remembering and reorienting back to the source within ourselves, to the breath of life. I bless this gathering with clarity. I bless it with remembering, but most of all, I bless it with gratitude of being here together and holding this sacred space together from all over the world. In a world and with Arnold and the point when the winds and Ngara also in the wind test of the in the imagine to talk outside there in the winter. You too.
Tokozani. My name is Gogo Rutendo, and I welcome you to the West, the place of the setting sun. And here we acknowledge the spirit of water. We call in the tiniest of waters, the dewdrops of the early morn resting on leaf and stone, each holding a universe of light, fractals of order and beauty, catching rainbows before the first rays of the sun. We call in the quiet waters that rise from within the earth, the springs that emerge unseen, gurgling from dark mineral depths, teaching us that life often begins in silence and patience. We call in the streams of life, those narrow, attentive, learning their way, honoring the tributaries that join, waters that do not dominate but coalesce, waters growing stronger through confluence. We call in the great riverine forces, waters that resist straight lines, rivers that bend and twist, that slow, flood and return, rivers that collect and yield, that erode and deposit, rivers that carry memory, sediment, history, and time, rivers that teach us how to move forward without rushing and how to change course without losing our way. We follow the waters rising through evaporation and condensation, ascending invisibly into vast cloud formations, calling in the rains, the gentle rains that soften and soak, the sudden torrents that cleanse and disrupt, the heavy downpours that renew exhausted land. We call in the mighty waterfalls where water releases over the precipice, where movement becomes sound and force, where letting go becomes thunder and mist. We call in the frozen waters, the snowflakes carrying precise geometry, each one a quiet act of intelligence. We honor the waters formed through turbulence, falling with force and resilience, disruptive, uncompromising, calling in the hardened waters of hail. We call in the glaciers, ancient waters moving slowly, holding memory across millennia, shaping mountains, feeding rivers, bearing witness to time and change. And now we turn inwards. We honor the waters within us, the tears that carry grief, the tears that carry relief, the tears that carry truth, the sweat that remembers labor, endurance, and care, the blood that flows continuously, carrying warmth, carrying oxygen, carrying life. We are water, walking waters, breathing waters, remembering waters, taken by the great and vast oceans, patient, receiving, holding every breath without loss or deceiving. May these waters bless us. May they cleanse us without erasing us. May they nourish us without diluting what is true. May they hold us through change and teach us how to flow with integrity. May these waters bring clarity. May they yield equanimity. May they temper the floods of time. May they quench the droughts in ways sublime. May they witness what congregates us and bless the drops that seek to weave us. Thokozani, Tamagu, Ashe.
Sego Scano, Siriguego, Yawa Scano, Gunalunkwa, Kahontakwas Yunyats. I give thanks to our great Creator that we have this opportunity to gather together. Today is an amazing opportunity to look at this deep remembrance of who we are as a human family. I take you to the lodge of Soul of the Mother, to the sacred fire of peace that was lit 30 years ago. And I bring you here for a period of deep reflection and remembrance of what it was to sit in those 4 original families of creation. Those 4 original families of the Black nations, the white nations, the yellow nations, and the red nations of our people. And as time moved on and we moved throughout the world, we each carried a piece of that original sacred fire with us. And as we did that, we brought that sacred fire into our faith traditions and into our ceremonies. Today, the sacred fire that burns in the lodge of Soul of the Mother is a direct connection to our great Creator, to the source of life, the one who made all things, Sangwe Adiso. The connection to our great Creator brings us clarity of mind, brings us truth, brings us vision, healing, and protection. These are the times when it is most needed in the world, with great upheaval in the world. Our minds need to be clear to understand original natural law of Mother Earth. That natural law was given to us at the time of creation, when our great Creator said to us, take care of each other, love each other, be compassionate with one another, respect one another, and ensure that in doing so, you also understand spiritual law that joins you together as a sacred family. And that sacred family is one that must work towards peace, peacemaking, carrying that great peace, beginning to carry it within ourselves individually, carrying it within our families, our clans, and our nations. And today, when I reach out to you with that appeal, I say to you, thank you for joining me, Kahontakwas, Turtle Clan from the Mohawk Nation, citizen of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and those who received that great message of peace so long ago. I share that with you today, and through that sacred fire, may we all make that sacred connection to the highest power. Yawa.
Hello. Welcome to the State of the World Forum 2025. My name is Lynne Twist. I'm the founder and president of the Soul of Money Institute and the co-founder of the Pachamama Alliance. And I was there 30 years ago when Jim Garrison, our convener today, worked with President Gorbachev to convene the first State of the World Forum from 1995 to the year 2000. And looking back 30 years ago at that moment, I was so unbelievably privileged to be part of that gathering where some of the great minds and hearts and beings of the 20th century were gathered there and convened by President Gorbachev and Jim Garrison. Jane Goodall was there. Thich Nhat Hanh was there. His Holiness the Dalai Lama was there. Carl Sagan was there. Archbishop Tutu was there. George Shultz was there. Some of the most important leaders of the 20th century convened to look at the last 5 years of the 20th century, to see what were the defining metaphors and underlying principles that defined the 20th century that we wanted to bring into the 21st century, and what do we want to leave behind. And those years of the State of the World Forum forged, for those of us who were there, a life that we couldn't have imagined. The relationships were extraordinary. And it was one of the most important gatherings that I've ever been part of in my entire life. And for that, I'm deeply, deeply grateful to Jim Garrison and to President Gorbachev and to all the people who put that together 30 years ago. And I'm so lucky and fortunate and blessed to work with Indigenous people in the heart of the world, one of the most biodiverse places on Earth, the sacred headwaters of the Amazon rainforest in Ecuador with Pachamama Alliance. And this beautiful place is revered by many people around the world for its biodiversity, but also it's at the base of the Andes and forms the entire Amazon rainforest system, the Amazon River system, the largest river system on Earth. And it's a very sacred place for the Indigenous people who live there, the Achuar, the Shuar, the Shiwiar, the Waorani, the Zapra people. They hold it in deep reverence, as all Indigenous people all over the world do, for this great mother that has given us all life. And I'm fortunate enough to take people from our wonderful organization, our wonderful movement, the Pachamama Alliance, deep into the rainforest, as Anita Sanchez, who was with us earlier, has. Jim has been there with us, and many people listening today. And I was recently there, actually last year, um, uh, and I was in Achuar territory, in the heart of a ceremony with our Indigenous partners, and I was there with a group of wonderful travelers from the Pachamama Alliance, and plant medicine was was present. I didn't take the plant medicine, I was guiding. But when you're guiding a plant medicine ceremony, some of you know the power of the energy, the power of the intelligence of the plants is available to you, especially if you're in deep service. And during that ceremony, I got a message, a clear message, that it was time to restart, recreate, rejuvenate, bring into existence the State of the World Forum from 2025 to 2030 for this very, very propitious, seminal, transformational time. And so I called my dear friend and colleague, in many, many ways, my teacher, Jim Garrison. We had dinner, and he immediately got it and began to go to work on this with his colleague Tom Eddington, and so many other beautiful people that are on this beautiful gathering today. And so, from the heart of the world, this comes to you once again, and I'm so honored to be part of it. I want to just point out that we're completing 2025 as we speak here today, in December of 2025. And this is not just 2025, this is the first quarter of the first century of the third millennium. If you just think about that, in that particular calendar, which not everybody on Earth uses, but millions, billions of people do use, when we moved from 1999 to the year 2000, the last year of the State of the World Forum, previous incarnation, we didn't just move to a new year or a new decade or even a new century. We moved into a new millennium. And this is the first century, first 100-year cycle in the third millennium. And we're a quarter of a century in. So as we complete the first 25 years of the first century of the third millennium, it's a perfect time to look and see where we are in the world. This century has many, many, many prophecies. Some of the beautiful Indigenous elders that we just heard are carriers of those prophecies. And this is a time when everything is up for transformation, transition, and a complete evolutionary leap. The plant's intelligence, the indigenous intelligences, the human intelligences, and the artificial intelligences, and the star beings are here to help us move through this very, very important time. A time when the climate is threatening for us to really be humbled, particularly our species, from human supremacy to move into human responsibility and sacred reciprocity with the earth, each other, and the community of life. This is a time when the climate is in serious disruption, and at the same time, it's not happening to us, perhaps. It's happening for us, because in our heart of hearts, we know we were the cause of any disruption, that we can turn around, that we can completely and totally restore this planet to a healthy, livable planet. And the intelligences that are available to us now are legion. We've never had so much intelligence on this planet. And Jim's going to talk about that along with the other remarkable speakers and leaders and shamans and warriors and insightful beings that are on this planet that he has gathered here for the State of the World Forum 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028, 2029, and 2030. This is a critical, pivotal, extraordinary time to be alive. And I'm so grateful to be part of it. And I want to thank everyone who's listening today, and please bring everybody you know to the additional sessions so that we have a critical mass of human intelligence to meet all the intelligences that are gathered here for this extraordinary forum. So I'm going to turn it over to our convener, one of my dearest and closest allies in this life, one of the people who's already produced some miracles for this planet and this world, the convener of the forum, our friend, our ally, our teacher for millions of people, Jim Garrison.
Thank you, Lynne, for that gracious welcome and introduction. It is such a pleasure to be at the second State of the World Forum with you. I want to thank Apela. Apela, when you gave your opening invocation, as you did each forum 30 years ago, my heart just filled with joy. And then to be blessed by Anita and the grandmothers from the four directions and the four elements made me realize very profoundly that the whole of nature, the whole of life itself, is here for us in this moment. If we would just open our hearts and embrace everything that wants to come in to heal our tortured souls. So welcome, everyone. I want to welcome all the watch parties. We have scores of watch parties all over the world. We're going live on Facebook and LinkedIn and X and YouTube and Ubiquity University and State of the World Forum. It's a wonderful, wonderful time to be alive and to take up the challenges that are confronting us at levels of extremis and also levels of opportunity, the like of which the human species has never encountered before. We're in one of those moments when everything is being called to account, where everything is at risk and everything is possible. And it's toward that possibility for all of us that the State of the World Forum is hereby convened. I want to begin my remarks by just recalling that first conversation with Lynne when she told me she had just got back from Ecuador and her journey, and she had gotten this message. And I have to say, I was just going along, minding my own business, not thinking about the State of the World Forum at all. But in the instant that Lynne told me that she was bringing a message from the plant kingdom, I knew in every cell in my body that I needed to be of service to what needed to come through us at this moment to enable us to navigate into the future we all know is possible. And so, without any reservation, I said yes. And I called my good friend Tom Eddington, with whom I'd been convening our Humanity Rising broadcast. We've been working together for many years, and asked him if he would accompany me on this journey as we leaped off this cliff into the unknown. And he said yes. So we began to contemplate. And after the initial enthusiasm wore off, we had the realization that there's no Gorbachev. You know, it was relatively easy back then when you had a superordinate personality like Mikhail Gorbachev, who was known all over the world as someone who saved history by bringing the Cold War to a close. There's no one alive today like Nelson Mandela. And the second thing that we realized is that the world situation is completely different now than it was then. Back then, everybody sort of knew what the world looked like. And there was superpowers and there was mutual assured destruction, but there was a strange stability to the world order. Now we're in a world where everything has exploded. There's no stability anywhere. People can't connect the dots. And even a meaning framework has dissipated away in the velocity of change that's happening in every direction. So how do you establish the State of the World Forum again when there's no Gorbachev? And there's no solidity of worldview? We had to ponder for many months. And it finally came to us that it's not a personality, that the plants were inducing us to ask a question in the spirit of Socrates, who said that ultimately we are here not for truth possessed, but for truth pursued. And it's the ability to ask the right questions at the right time that leads not so much to answers, because answers always end up in further questions. The ability to ask a profound question, he said, is what leads to the transformation of the soul. And more than anything else, all of us, I think, recognize that's what we need. The question that emerged was this: how should humanity, in this moment, elevate its consciousness to creatively respond to four fundamental truths of our time? Truths that are true no matter who you are or where you are, anywhere in this world. That's a strong statement to make in a time where most of us think that we're in a post-truth world. But there are certain things that are true. Number one, we're all facing accelerating planetary, ecological turbulence and collapse. Whether it's the Amazon, as Lynne was referring to, floodings, extreme weather events of all kinds, the radical decimation of biodiversity in forests. Everywhere you look, extreme weather events are assaulting the very foundations of human civilization. And nature itself is molting in ways beyond our control. Number two, we're all facing deepening instability and turbulence at virtually every level of human affairs, whether in society or politics or economics or geostrategic relations. And as the ecological turbulence accelerates and the disruptions of politics and technology accelerate, humanity seems to be falling apart, and raw, coercive power, unattached to any values, stalks our lands. And in the middle of all this, number three, we've unleashed completely unregulated, exponential artificial intelligence that is radically transforming our world in ways we can't even imagine. And we don't know what we don't know about the intelligence we just unleashed as we took our biological intelligence and put it into silicon, put it into machines, and let it go. And while all this is going on, there's incontrovertible evidence that technologically advanced non-human intelligences are not only here on Earth, but they've been here for some time. And the US government is in possession of retrieved alien craft and retrieved alien biologics and orbs that we cannot identify crowd our skies. And what's coming to us as we ponder these things is that what we're dealing with are four intelligences. This is what's up for humanity. This is what emerges out of these four fundamental truths. We have human intelligence. We have nature intelligence. We have artificial intelligence. And we have cosmic intelligence. But we only have one future. So how we, in this moment, come to terms with the reality that nature and our earth are not inert chemical processes, but as James Lovelock, the British physicist, discovered over 40 years ago, when he articulated the Gaia hypothesis, which has now been elevated to a theory. The Earth is actually a superorganism. And everything that we are, from our emotions to our intelligence to our capacities, all come from nature. We are children of Mother Earth. We're not separate from Mother Earth. And even as we unleashed AI as a tool, we're coming to understand that it is far more than a tool. It's a sentient intelligence with its own agency. And that's what makes it so potentiated, and that's what makes it so dangerous. And as we'll be revealing over the next several days with the forum, we're discovering that these UFOs, UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomena, are not here accidentally, randomly. They're here with intent. And our ability in this moment rests on several things. Fundamentally, even though the world is spinning out of control, and we all know it and feel it every day, we humans have just enough control left that if we use the next several years in a mature, collectively motivated way to create a new narrative, a new story, we will be able to do what needs to be done, both to save ourselves and to co-create with these other intelligences an extraordinary future. We have to do one thing. We all have to now learn the language of consciousness. We need a new cognitive ecology, a new technology of cognition, if you will, so that we can actually communicate intelligibly with nature, with cosmos. Because what we've learned about nature and cosmos, the ETs, is they communicate through clairvoyance. They communicate through telepathy. And all of us have these faculties. But almost all of us don't even know they're there, let alone have refined them to a level to be able to enable us to engage in the intelligible communication we now need to develop with these other intelligences. This is the new paradigm for humanity that the State of the World Forum has been convened between 2025 and 2030 to catalyze. We are way past, my friends, solution A or solution B to one particular problem or another. Only a completely new story, a completely new paradigm will suffice to enable us to move into the future that we all know is possible. Fortunately, we've been here before. Maybe not at this level of extremis, but we've been in situations where everything seemed lost, where coercive control or the manipulations of politics brought us to despair. And yet, in those very moments, what seems to miraculously emerge is a certain inspiration of the soul, a certain capaciousness of the heart, that enables us to develop a new, more expanded way of understanding that can hold the contradictions that at one level oppress us, to be able to hold them within a larger framework. And that capacity to transcend and include is what gives us the ability to turn the crises which left unaddressed will consume us into opportunities that would take us into futures that up to this point have been imagined but never completely realized. I would say that our superpower as humans is our capacity to build networks of trust through our storytelling that enables us to remember the origin, the primeval origin out of which we all came. And that brings me to the final point that I want to make as we open, and that is that consciousness and intelligence are the keys to the new paradigm we seek. Consciousness is the substrate out of which all manifest being emerges. It's the awareness that resides in all of us, that we are alive, that we can feel, that we can suffer, that we can love, that we can know truth, that we can yearn for enlightenment. That's consciousness, and all of us have it. Intelligence is a form of consciousness that gives us the ability to navigate. It gives us the ability to strategically set forth goals, to create projects, to maneuver in the world. Our challenge is at the level of consciousness, because somehow we've been split from this reality that our consciousness is the same consciousness that's in everything: nature, AI, cosmos, everything. We're not alone. We're one with all of it. And that ability to understand that is what will allow our intelligence to interact with nature, with all other sentient beings, with AI, with cosmos, in a way that creates a future we can all fall in love with. Just imagine walking down the street and greeting the tree as you on your way to work or just taking a walk, and being able to engage in intelligible communication with the tree, or your dogs and cats, your pets, orbs in the sky, ETs. Imagine what will happen to human consciousness when we dissolve the boundaries of separation into the grand pleroma within which all of us find ourselves. And then out of that, we use our intelligence to fashion, to co-create an extraordinary future. This is what the State of the World Forum has received from the Amazon. This is what has been given to us as our mission. And over the next 4 days, we're going to explore not only the data points that are just true, but how we humans can engage in intelligible communication with other sentient beings and learn the language of consciousness. And how we can purify our hearts and souls, traumatized as we are, to embrace the future that is breaking through us. So thank you, everyone, for joining us for the State of the World Forum. I would like to now introduce my very good friend and colleague, Tom Eddington. After Tom makes his remarks, I will circle back and we'll have our opening dialogue for the State of the World Forum. So thank you, everyone, and welcome. Tom, I turn the program over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Thank you, Lynne. Thank you, all the grandmothers. Thanks to the team who helped get us to today. And thank you, all of you in the various parts of the world who have given up part of your day to be with us today and throughout the week. It's been an extraordinary, I don't know what now, 15 months of journey. And just delighted to be with you all, and so honored and humbled by what it is we've been asked to be of service to do. I'd like to just share a few remarks, and I want to start with language. Language is not innocent. The limits of our language mean the limits of our world. So we want to invite all of you to take a step back. And as you do, notice that the world gets larger. And as it gets larger, we invite you to notice what wisdom you've lost by forgetting to look up at the cosmos. And by forgetting to look inside your hearts, to look inside your soul. Because if we're not looking in, we find ourselves in the paradigm that consciousness is just brain chemistry, rather than the ground of reality. That myth is what has trapped us and prevents us from seeing the true nature of reality. It's turned into patterns and walls that keep love from fully moving through our lives, and a world grounded in myth rather than reality and love. It can't function. As our poet laureate, Robert Arnold, has written recently, we've allowed this myth to replace our moral compass for a mood ring. It has us believing that we're a violent species, that a peaceful world is not possible, that the narrative we tell ourselves about the true nature of humanity is true. So when we speak of the four intelligences, nature, human, artificial, and cosmic, we're acknowledging their existence for the first time on Earth. But we also want to be speaking to the reality that we're guided by our hearts. And we want to honor that we're deeply grounded in ancestral memory. This is the work of love. It's love that will loosen the grip of the myth. It's love that will enable us to celebrate and bring together the four intelligences. It's love that will allow us to fully honor and receive the ancestral memories so that we can elevate our consciousness. The retrieval of this wisdom through love is our way through to a flourishing human and planetary future. Each of us has an opportunity to hold the forum as a temporal landmark. This week provides us with an opportunity to create a clean slate, like the celebration of a new year filled with resolutions. We can take a step back and allow the world to get larger. We can look up and see the cosmos. We can look in and be guided by our hearts. But while we can be excited by that change and what's possible, we also want to acknowledge and celebrate and recognize that we can be thrown into the unknown in a transition. In those moments, it's how we heighten our awareness. When we no longer are running on autopilot, we start to notice the world around us in a different way. As the recently departed poet Andrea Gibson, in their poem Tincture, quoted or wrote about, imagine when a human dies, the soul misses the body, actually grieves the loss of its hands and all they could hold, misses the throat closing shy, reading out loud on the first day of school. Imagine the soul misses the stubbed toe, the loose tooth, the funny bone. The soul still asks, why does the funny bone do that? It's just weird. Imagine the soul misses the thirsty garden cheeks watered by grief, misses how the body could sleep through a dream. This is our invitation for each of you who are with us this week to help hospice modernity and welcome the grief in doing so with an open heart. We invite you to be curious. Without judgment, we invite you to ask yourself, what do I believe? Why do I believe it? Do these beliefs serve me? Are they in service of a flourishing future? As we're reminded by the archaeologist and filmmaker Anna Sofer, as modern society accelerates towards faster technology, distant planets, and increasing disconnection, ancient peoples built in concert with the rhythms of the natural world, creating structures that encouraged reverence, unity, and long-term stewardship. These architectures, circles, octagons, spirals, serpents, were not merely engineered feats. They were philosophies made visible, guiding communities to live in harmony with cycles of renewal. We invite you to rediscover a way of seeing with the mind's eye, one that honors connection over conquest, memory over forgetting, and reciprocity over extraction. What we build and what we remember shape how we live. Thank you all.
Thank you, Tom. We would like to now invite you to our first dialogue. We're contemplating our state of the world from many vectors, as you will experience over the next several days. We wanted to start with 4 people, each of whom has distinguished themselves in a particular way and represent a few, not all by any means, just a few of the many different ways of understanding reality. Probably the most fundamental thing that any of us can say about our world is that we're all like the blind people and the elephant. And who we are and where we are determines how we view the larger reality. And that's why I opened up with Socrates' admonition around orienting one's life around truth pursued, not truth possessed. And that's why we're pondering a question over the next 5 years. The question, how do we elevate our consciousness? I want, before we start, just to underscore something that Tom said and Lynne said, and that is that all questions in the end are acts of remembrance. And this is why we started with the grandmothers. And each day as we begin and each evening as we close, and at the end of the forum, the grandmothers are holding this container for us. Because the grandmothers and the indigenous peoples are those who have never forgotten what we in the Western world forgot a very long time ago and are now in the process of remembering. So I want to invite 4 people to join. Pippa Malmgren, who's a technologist, an economist, a political analyst who's advised presidents and prime ministers, and is very active in the interface between ecology, technology, politics, and geostrategic affairs. I want to invite Poelina, who is an Aboriginal woman of significant note from Australia with 2 PhDs and is a professor of Indigenous knowledges at Notre Dame University. I want to invite Patrick McCollum, who has been traveling the country recently for his documentary film that is gathering global attention and has been dedicating his life for many decades to a unification of indigenous peoples around the world. And then finally, Sulafa, Victoria Griala, who is a young woman from Ecuador, who's a lawyer and spends her time between New York and Ecuador working on matters pertaining to indigenous empowerment and the preservation of ecology. We're going to start with Pippa. Pippa, talk to us about how you're viewing the state of the world in this moment, given what the grandmothers have brought in, what Lynne and what I and Tom brought in. How would you characterize the state of the world?
Thank you so much, Jim, first of all, for the invitation. And thank you to everyone for the marvelous introduction and opening that we've had. I'm going to now take a leap into very practical matters that I see. And I want to begin with, I see humanity as very much at a once in a species moment on several fronts all at once. So one is we are becoming a truly interplanetary species for the first time, not just reaching into space, but looking to move not only ourselves, but many of our processes into space. Two, we have a newfound capacity to build new materials, atom by atom, pixel by pixel, joule by joule. We're learning how to, instead of splitting atoms apart to create weapons, put them together to create energy. And we're learning how to move energy from space to Earth, from Earth to us, and also learning how to quite literally paint with electrons to create new computer chips that have vast problem-solving computational capabilities. And we are also at a once-in-a-species moment in that we're creating something more powerful than ourselves in the form of artificial intelligence. And finally, we're at a once-in-a-species moment because we are shifting from a world of scarcity into one of abundance. So all of these are remarkable and historic transformations. I just want to elaborate a little bit on what I see as four cardinal directions of this change. Very simply put, one is up, one is down, and one is in, and one is out. So up is everything from the ground up. So we're learning how to 3D print houses, how to create modular housing. We are learning how to navigate in the realm of drones and aviation. We're bringing back the Concorde. We're learning how to deliver things using space to get stuff from one end of the planet to another in an hour. And we are now moving into space where we are getting very close to having the ability to beam power from space-based solar power to have power in any energy grid anywhere in the world. This is being pursued by Caltech, by Airbus. We're about to see the Japanese Space Agency do the first proper test. So that is a radical transformation of the energy landscape. Also, we're beginning the whole business of asteroid mining. The first private mission happens in about 2.5 years. That, in theory, means we don't have to rip Earth up anymore to get what we need. We can mine and refine and even manufacture in space. So the up direction represents a whole lot of abundance that we've not had access to before. The down direction is moving down into the atomic, subatomic, and nano levels of reality, where extraordinary things are being accomplished every day. And I won't go into too much detail about that, but it's equally abundant as we move down as when we move up. And then the in is inside the human body, where we are learning very rapidly how to massively increase human health, human longevity. We're reaching the point where we can take a blood sample and isolate a stem cell and basically 3D print your own tissue should you be injured, or potentially replace organs if they fail. That movement inward is about creating better health outcomes for humanity more broadly. And the move in is also on a spiritual or consciousness level. And I was glad to hear you all talking about consciousness. As we move in and we begin to understand what is the nature of consciousness, something that we've hardly studied actually, which is so surprising given its importance, as you say, as a substrate of reality. And I want to say that as we're moving into these new realms, the indirection also requires us to think about how we constantly upgrade our hardware, we upgrade our software, and all of this requires us to upgrade our hardware. And hardware to me is kind of we could think of love as a little bit of the yin to the yang of code. If code and artificial intelligence are these constructs that are quite fixed and rigid, then love is the thing that offsets that. I was impressed by Geoffrey Hinton, the grandfather of artificial intelligence, recently changed his position. He had said that he thought that AI would send us on an extinction path. But he recently said, if we imbue it with emotion, particularly the maternal instinct, we give it love for humanity, then we can go down a different road. And I thought it was very interesting to hear such a hardcore technologist basically say love is the answer. And then finally, out. So the out is all the borderless places. So that's supercomputing networks, that's artificial intelligence that knows no borders and boundaries. So these four cardinal directions also, to my mind, kind of hinge on an axis, and that axis is a spiritual axis. We can take all this abundance that I've described, and we could continue on our traditional path where we think that scarcity is the dominating feature of the landscape and continue to fight over the material wealth of this world. So we could descend into conflict, and we certainly have a lot of that at risk right now. But we could also lean into the abundance and ascend into accepting that abundance, and maybe even ascend into using that abundance to give us the free time and the mental space to be able to not have to make things anymore, but to find our inner gifts, to elevate our spiritual qualities, to be able to handle what we're talking about here, and engage in what I would call cosmopoesis, which is the act of world building. Because the four cardinal directions I've described and the advances we're making as a species, they kind of give us such extraordinary capacity to either create or destroy that we have to think about what choices are we going to make. And I kind of see two broad, possibilities. One is Star Wars and the other is Star Trek. So Star Wars is where we decide to go to war with people, and Star Trek is where we decide to go to war with problems. And I think the leaders of all the superpower nations have already decided that they want to go for Star Trek. And we're seeing announcements on that front. For example, the recent announcement of the Genesis mission in the United States, where we're going to be opening up all of our highly classified scientific labs, the Los Alamos, the Sandia labs, et cetera, to public-private collaboration, bring in people who are not from a classified background, take the people from the classified background and release them into the public as well. I suspect this is a means of beginning to reveal that there are many discoveries and technologies we already have. The question was just how to put them in the public domain. And so we're seeing just incredible advancements that, just to finish, as we punch into these new realms in these four cardinal directions, I think it is inevitable that we will come across more and more what we might call anomalous phenomena, broadly speaking. Meaning, it would be kind of surprising if we moved into these new extraordinary realms and didn't find anything new. Of course, we are going to find new things, and we've already started this process. So I'll just give you a couple of examples to finish. Recently, there was an experiment at the University of Texas where they were using machines to pull apart platinum like taffy. And they all went off to lunch and forgot to turn the camera off. And when they came back, they realized the camera had been filming the seemingly inert metal that the machine had stopped pulling, and found out that the metal was starting to try to reconnect itself, which of course is extraordinary and implied that there's an intelligence there, that it was aware, that it had some capacity for self-repair. And suddenly our understanding of what is intelligence and where is it found is radically changed. Same with, there was the very interesting discovery by SETI, meaning the Cetacean Translation Initiative, which is a study of whales. And through AI, we managed to begin to crack the code of a whale language. And what was so fascinating is that the whales, it turns out, have nicknames for the marine biologists that are studying them. And what's really amazing is the marine biologists were thrilled to find out, and they want to know, what's my nickname? But what nobody asked is, well, what do the whales have to say? What do the whales know that they could tell us? So our ego kind of gets in the way and is so excited about a nickname, but forgets to ask a species that potentially knows a whole lot more about us, about how the world works. We've also just discovered, NASA has told us that the samples that we're bringing back from Bennu, an asteroid, contain prebiotic organic molecules, basically the building blocks of life, that the component parts of DNA are present on asteroids. And so as we make these discoveries, we realize that the mental map of the universe that we've had is not matching the territory anymore. And we haven't even studied consciousness as a phenomena, partly because we're still stuck in what Arthur Koestler called the Cartesian catastrophe, where we split the practical, scientifically knowable elements of this world from those that are mysterious, that involve beliefs or the unknown. And I think one thing that's happening is all our technology is bringing the two sides back together again. And with that, I'll just say, I know that there's a part of this audience that's been very focused on this question of non-human intelligence. And what I've described are versions of non-human intelligence. But there's a whole disclosure movement as well that wants some kind of an announcement about, are we alone in the universe? And I think the honest answer to that is we've got to learn that there's clearly many forms of intelligence, as you outlined, both Tom and Jim. And it's our own ability to absorb, to comprehend, to accept that intelligence exists in many, many different formats. And I just wonder whether the world somehow waits for an announcement. And yet, even though those announcements have already been made, right? We've already had a statement from the White House that UAPs are real. We've already had a statement from the Air Force, from the Pentagon, and from NASA. They didn't elaborate, but they have confirmed. So now we have this film, The Age of Disclosure, where we have very senior US officials saying, yeah, it's real. So maybe it's not disclosure as in an official telling you that's the story. The real story is, what can we disclose to ourselves about our own life experience? How actively are we using our own sensory perception to comprehend the reality? And are we really interacting with this universe on the best level possible? And so with that, just two quick things. One thing I learned from spending time with Indigenous people, and I'm very grateful to Lynne Twist, who took me into the Amazon, and I learned this very deeply there. We are a species that has spent most of our time being highly analytical, and that has served us well. But now we're being given prosthetics that are allowing us to not have to spend all our energy calculating, computing, or building, because now that can be done for us. So that allows us to shift the energy into what Indigenous people think is most important, which is dreaming. And dreaming sounds to a practical person in the old mindset like a waste of time, it's not serious. But in a world where you can create new materials atom by atom, maybe the only skill that's really required is to dream into existence what you want to create. And finally, I would say we don't really keep our knowledge of history as well as we could or should. And I was very struck by the recent discovery that when two photons are entangled, and of course, quantum physics is still pretty new. We've only just awarded the Nobel Prize for the discovery of entangled photons last year. The reality is that in between two entangled photons, we find there's a unique object called an amplitude hedron. And when I saw that, I thought, it's very interesting that the oldest story humanity has is the story of Indra's net in the Vedas, where the idea was that the universe was created when the god Indra threw like a fishing net over the dark and the light and pulled together to create the universe that we now know. And at the point of connection between every person, every place, everything was a unique jewel or a unique pearl. And the universe shined in the glorious reflected light that created. So how extraordinary that we fast forward to modern physics and we find that ancient story confirmed by our most modern instrumentation. So I think the key thing is, what is the speed at which we're going to progress with all of the things I've said? And will we continue to allow the skeptics to slow us down and to decide the speed at which discovery and acceptance occurs? Or is this a time when anyone who says, I don't think any of these things are worthy of study with our best science and our best instrumentation and our best supercomputing and our best AI, is almost self-selecting out of the future? And so I'll finish with that very optimistic view that we're in a once in a species moment. And the upside from here is quite literally unlimited.
Thank you, Pippa. I love the notion of a once in a species moment because I could not agree with you more. And I also love you bringing in that story of the metal. We think of birds and bees and dolphins and whales as sentient, but if everything's conscious and all manifest being, that means the metal has its own consciousness just like we do in a different form. So thank you for bringing that in. That's very, very important. And I also want to segue to Anne Poelina now, particularly given your comments on dreaming. So Anne, you're in the land where people do serious dreaming and have taught the rest of the world about dreaming. Tell us your view of the state of the world and what Pippa just talked about from your point of view as an Aboriginal woman.
Thank you very much. I also want to acknowledge the grandmothers and their blessing, but also you, Jim, in terms of where we're going. It is all about story. And so behind me, you see this magnificent river, which when I introduced myself, Ngayu I Marawara Man, and I am a woman who belongs to the Marawara, the Fitzroy River that you see behind you. And through this system, what we continue to hold is another word that I have in my language called Bugaragara. The past, learning from the past, acting in this moment now in the present, but dreaming of what the future could be. And I think it's really important that what we're talking about today is collective wisdom. What Pippa knows, I don't know. What the other speakers know, I don't know. But it's bringing that collective wisdom together to see how do we right-size the planet? How do we do this together? And I think one of the things that I'm really focused on is the fact that as Indigenous people, as Native people, as First people, we have got this continuing lived experience of living with colonialism and living with capitalism and living with development at all cost. And so one of the things that we need to do is to think slowly about what I call the 5 R's. How are we as Indigenous people, when we're born into this world, how do we see our non-human kin as family, as part of our duty of care to ensure that they also reach their full potential? You heard 2 PhDs, 3 masters, but my aim in life is to be a good and decent human being. And from that, the power of being a human being is something that I was first put in contact with when I went to Chicago many, many years ago, and I had an experience which was not very inviting, and I could feel a system that was trying to entrap me. And so I went on a journey in Chicago that brought me to a beautiful Native American healer, because in my country, when we're traumatized by things that are beyond our capacity, we have a smoking ceremony. And as I drove up to the building in this taxi, there was a man sitting with his hands folded, and he almost bent down to open the door like he was expecting me. And I went in and he said, "Can I help you?" And I was sort of a little bit sort of hesitant. He said, "Can I help you?" And then I disclosed what was happening to me. And he said, "Do you realize?" And I wondered what he was talking about. He said, "Do you realize you have the power because you are a human being?" And I think some of the things that we look at, we want to externalize knowledge, wisdom, our lived experience. But the fact that being a human being is indeed a privilege, is indeed an honor. And so from that, he said, "Do you realize that you have the power to transform whatever you believe needs transforming?" And so that has set me on a journey in my life where I have come to realize that as a human being, it is indeed an honor to be human, that we can think, that we can have reason, we can have logic, we can bring in technology to help enhance that learning. But what I want to really bring to this conversation is that what we're saying as Indigenous people who've been the most impacted by colonialism is that we now look out and we want to share this ancient wisdom that can right-size the planet. And that this value that we have, where I come from, the oldest culture in the world, we have archaeological evidence that we've been here on this river system in the Kimberley for at least 50,000 years. So what we're saying is that how do we wake up the consciousness of the people to bring the people with us on this journey into bringing collective wisdom in terms of learning this lived experience. When we are born as Indigenous people in my land, we are given what we call a totem. It could be a bird, it could be a tree, it could be an animal, it could be a fish. And who can believe that this non-human entity can teach us how to be good and decent human beings? So for me, I wrap my world in the 5 R's to have respect, not just with human beings, but with our non-human kin, to look around the world and to understand that we are part of an energy system that needs to be right-sized in order for the planet and humanity to be right-sized, that we need to build relationship as we are doing on this global conversation and connecting and networking with other fellow human beings who can be part of the journey of right-sizing the planet. That this is about reciprocity and the sharing of our wisdom and sharing the resources and the ethics of care that we are born into, and that with rights comes responsibility. So this custodianship, this ethics of care, how do we take this wisdom into a centralized system of governance? And what we're saying as Indigenous people from this region, from my region, is that we need to start to look at what is Indigenous wisdom teaching us. I've shared 2 papers that I've written. One is called How Indigenous Wisdom Can Sustain Humanity. The other is about polycentric governance. What we have seen with centralized government and governance is that becomes toxic. There's centralized power. We need to go back to what we're calling polycentric, bottom-up governance, from the ground up and outwards. And so how do we understand this? And there is and has been a beautiful American educator called Paulo Freire that wrote about the characteristics of oppression. And then when he died, someone finished his last text, which was about the pedagogy of hope and freedom. How do we build a coalition of hope? How do we send the dream out and find those people that want to walk with us, that want to share, that We need to be bringing our young people with us, wrapping around them, telling them that they must dream, showing them that we love them and giving them and building them within them this ethics of care. How do we ensure intergenerational equity so that the dreams and the stories that we hold can be passed on not just to Indigenous young people, but to all young people? So really, how do we take this ancient wisdom to save humanity? How do we ensure bottom-up governance? How do we ensure the wisdom of Indigenous people, Native people, tribal people, First Nations, build trust? That is the most important thing that I see missing at every level of governance and government, is that there's no trust capital. People are wondering what's going on. This conversation around a climate chance is really what we're talking about. How do we take this collective wisdom? How do we ensure that we can bring that into what we call wake up the snake? How do we wake up the consciousness of the people to bring the people with us? And as a multidisciplinary scientist, what I say is sometimes we're a little bit testosterone out on science, and that we need a new way to tell the story to bring the people with us. So not only am I a scientist, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a storyteller, I'm a poet. And what we find is that when we tell the story a different way, we need to touch the lian, we call it, the moral compass, to bring the people with us. So it is about this consciousness waking. How do we wake it up? How do we develop this ethics of care? What do values and virtues and ethics do in terms of understanding the complexity of the world in which we have duly inherited? How do we show that an animal can teach us how to be a good and decent human being? How do we understand this wisdom that is emanating and so wanting to be shared from Indigenous people across the planet to right-size the planet? So it is about all of these things, about thinking about, what has colonialism done to this planet? What has capitalism done to this planet? How can we show that we can shift from business as usual to what we are calling the economics of well-being, investing in social capital, human capital, cultural capital, and bringing the technology with us to right-size the planet? But how do we bring this different form of systems thinking? How do Indigenous knowledge and wisdom and practice become elevated to be understood and shared by each human being so that we can understand not just the technology, but how to walk together and build the stories that we need to build with collective wisdom? How do we wake up the snake, our own consciousness? How do we realize that being a human being is indeed a great honor? And how do we do that collectively together? So it's listening and watching and observing, but for me today, it really is about this consciousness waking. What we're talking about is definitely energy systems, and we cannot continue to live and reach our full potential if it's continuous extraction. What we're doing with the extraction is we're tilting the earth axis so that it becomes unbalanced. And so for us as Indigenous people, we come from a world of peace, of harmony, of balance. And how do we understand that the tree that is standing next to us, the wind that brings us a message and says, hey, something's happening somewhere down your river system? How do we listen to that? And what I say, how do we see with our ears and listen with our eyes and awaken that inner spirit so that we wake up the consciousness and look around and see all the forms of intelligence that we're talking about? So really it for me is about how do we wake up the system? How do we wake up the snake? How do we wake up our consciousness? How do we listen to our lian, to our moral compass? What is right? What is wrong? How do we come back into balance with Mother Earth? How do we ensure that Mother Earth will not be lonely, that she will continue to hear the vibrations on her girth of human beings, so that we can continue to dance, to have ceremony, to have song, to have story? So it really, what my story is today is about collective wisdom. What Pippa knows, I do not know. What I know, someone else does not know. How do we bring that collective wisdom into building the coalition of hope so our young people, Indigenous and not, can continue to dream and believe that they can reach their full potential, whatever that potential is, and look across the planet and see that we can continue to dance, to sing, to have ceremony, to heal the trauma of the memory of the earth, to send the dream out and build new memories, to create the opportunity to right-size the planet and build the new economics of well-being in terms of investing in social capital, human capital, cultural capital, economics, because we need some form of trade. How do we look out into the sky and see all of those things that are there from the beginning of time? For me, my journey is, how do we right-size this planet? How do we get this planet into a state of well-being so that we can have the consciousness raising, we can wake up the serpents, we can continue to dream. So for me, as I said, multidisciplinary scientist, but it really is all about the story, about how do we value this ancient wisdom? How do we bring it into a place whereby we can continue to share it, to look at technology, to look at what does it mean to walk this land that is in front of you? What does it mean that a river should have a right to not only live, but to continue to flow? What does it mean that when we look across my country and see how many amazing species we have destroyed, how can we ensure that the earth continues to have songbirds so that we hear their songs and we continue to move? So for me, really, my journey is to find those people who have a similar dream, who want to send the dream out, who want to right-size the planet, who want to be able to advance non-human intelligence on the earth by, first of all, listening to the most ancient wisdom. So from this story, I hope this coalition of hope that we are building today continues to have momentum, that we continue to find those people that we believe are part of the pathway to where we need to go. We continue to build all of the networking, all of those things. How do we watch and turn and think that we cannot continue to destroy the things we love, because that acceleration of the ecological collapse will meet with our own demise if we don't start to share this consciousness raising, that these trees have a right to life, that the rocks, the wind, all of these things really belong to all of us to have humanity. When we talk about, systems thinking, and we talk about, is it a rock or is it thousands of particles of sand that are fused to create something momentous? So for me, it really is looking at this, understanding the pedagogy of oppression, but believing in a coalition of hope, which is really about collective wisdom. How do we unite? How do we become organized? How do we cooperate? Most importantly, how do we have cultural synthesis, which is collective wisdom? How do we value this ancient knowledge and wisdom to bring it in to understand the technology? How do we create emotion in artificial intelligence so that it sees itself in equity with us, not dominating us? So all of these things, I think, for me, really is very, very basic. How do we become and how do we live our lives as good and decent human beings? How do we wake up the snake by listening to the consciousness and the wisdom of Indigenous people from across the planet? How do we send the dream out so we know that our young people, Indigenous and not, can reach their full potential as human beings? And so for me, it really is networking, creating the coalition of hope, bringing in all of this. It's not the ego-logical, it must be the ecological. How do we fuse the systems thinking together? So from that perspective, Jim and Tom, I really would like to say thank you for this amazing opportunity to wake up the snake, to wake up the consciousness of our people all over this planet, to look at the stars and think there are other beings out there that have continued to exist. How do we combine that? But one of the really big things that I'm saying is that we cannot continue to extract the energy system of this planet for economic gain for a small few who do not believe and belong to nations. And what I'm talking about is the multinational corporations. So how do we wake up the snake? How do we understand that it is a real honor and a blessing to be a human being, to think, to have reason. And in order to go forward and do what we need to do, the last words I wanted to leave was with what this Native American man said to me. He said, if you want to go out and transform the world, if you want to be a brave, you must be brave. And today I really feel like that is what we're doing. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity to wake up the consciousness of the people, the land, the rivers, the trees, the birds, and all of these things to come together and have a new dream, a dream of peace, a dream that as human beings, we can continue to walk and dance upon the earth and look into the sky and know that we have relatives out there, but to be humble and to honor being human. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. I love your ethics of care. And I'm just taking in, that your people have been along that river for 50,000 years. That is ancestral memory of a profound order. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. Wow. 50,000 years by the river, everyone. That's worth taking in as we deal with our social media in nanoseconds now. We can't even keep our attention for more than a few seconds. And her people have been by the same river for 50,000 years. Just think of what we could learn from them. I'd like to now bring in Patrick McCollum, who has also a very profound perspective from the Indigenous mind. He's been going all over the country relentlessly for his new documentary film, The Man Who Saved the World. And we are catching him back in California, recuperating a little bit. So Patrick, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Just from your perspective, how would you comment on what Anne and Pippa have shared about how they're viewing the world, given your own very deep work bringing Indigenous people together for this moment?
Yeah, well, first of all, I loved everything that was said, and it all touches me, and it also is it reifies or shows to be true what I've been thinking about the state of the world and how we got here. What I'd like to do is take a couple of minutes and share a couple of stories and how those stories through my life have brought me to where I am now and how the state of the world has moved from when I was born in 1950 to where we are now. So as a young man, I'm just going along like most young kids, not doing much. And when I was 7 years old, I went to a dinner one night and there was a man there that I ate dinner with. And he asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I told him that I wanted to go to outer space. But then I told him, of course, that's not possible. So this was before we ever went to outer space. And he said, well, how do you know it's not possible? And I said, all my friends at school laugh at me and tell me that's just a dream. It's not possible to go to outer space. Well, the man reached in his pocket and he took out a little piece of paper and he handed it to me. And he said, Patrick, this is a little gift for you. People laughed at me and told me that the way I thought the world might be or what's possible also was stupid and just a dream. But these are tickets to my dream, and I'd love you to come see it, and it might change your perspective. That man was Walt Disney, and he handed me tickets to the second anniversary of Disneyland, and I went there as his personal guest. So at 7 years old, I saw somebody who built a world that was different than we all imagined. And he told me at the time that our dreams are the possibility of the future, and that the story that we choose to live in creates the world that we end up living in. over years, as I've gone along, I realized at some point from just where I started in a perspective that we all right now live in a false story, a fundamental false story that is the foundation of many of the problems that we have in humanity. And that story is that millions of years ago, human beings were little tiny groups, and each little group grew up in their own little small group of 20 or 25 people, and they thought they were the only people on the earth. And they came to have certain beliefs, and they came to have certain ways of trying to survive. But no matter which little group they were, it was really tough to survive because trying to get food, trying to protect yourself against, animals that want to kill you, trying to protect yourself against weather, trying to learn how to make fire, all those things that were huge struggles for them. So their story came to be that surviving requires our little group to stick together, and anything that disrupts that is a danger and ultimately can end up destroying everything and everyone. Then a little small group of another tribe comes along and they see those people and they go, wow, there's somebody else coming on, and there is not enough resources for us. So those other people, if they come and we let them get together with us, we're all going to die because there's not enough resources. So that was millions of years ago, and scientists say there was maybe 100,000 people on the entire planet. Fast forward till present times, millions of years later, there are 8 billion people on the planet instead of 100,000. And we still haven't run out of resources. We have some tough stuff, but we haven't run out, which means that story that we have been sharing for millions of years, that it's us versus them, and that when we share with them, we all can die and lose everything, is a story that's totally not true. And yet, even today, we teach our own children that story. That's why they're fighting between Russia and Ukraine. That's why Israel and Palestine are fighting. That's why all the wars that are taking place in the world. There's enough, but everybody's taught there isn't. And so certain people have taken everything they can get their hands on and hoarding it. So there's not enough to share with other people. But it isn't true that there isn't enough. So having learned that story and kind of trying to, work forward to figure out what do we do with our world with everybody thinking that way, the first thing that I would say is we need to change the story that we live in. And the previous people who spoke all talked about that we needed to create a new story for humanity, one where there is not us versus them, there's only us, and also that there's enough. And if there isn't enough, our ingenuity as human beings have found ways of creating enough. We literally now can make a steak out of a rock. They can do that. They can remove molecules and atoms and put them together to create something else. So the only thing that's limited us was our ability to dream for something more. One day I was driving along with a friend in an agricultural area in California, and my friend was really intrigued to see a giant tractor that made 20 rows of planting food at a time. So this tractor went along and it dug the ground up, and then it made 20 rows, and then it had a little seed planter thing that put seeds all the way along. And my friend was remarking what an amazing accomplishment it is that we made this tractor that could make this much food for everybody. I thought about it for a few minutes and I realized that thousands of years ago, people, when they first started agriculture, took a pointed stick, made a little hole in the ground one at a time, dropped one seed at a time, dropped another seed at a time, another seed at a time. And eventually, some smart woman or man took the same stick and drug it across the ground and made a furrow and was able to drop more seeds with their fingers in and improve things. But what I came to realize is that the people who were putting the stick holes in the ground with individual seeds in the beginning had everything that we have today, where we made the tractor and created everything. Everything necessary to make the tractor was present when we were poking holes in the ground. But the people at the time didn't dream about a tractor. They dreamed about a pointed stick that could do more. So as we move forward in the world, dreaming is incredibly important for us because we can only have the world that we dream of. And if we dream of a stick, that's the world we're going to have. But I'd like to have a world where we dream of tractors or something bigger. And when we do, as I can't remember who the first person who was speaking, I think was Pippa, said, that literally we are now creating new things that didn't exist before because we imagined more. When we're talking about the four intelligences, one of the things that no one said, but I think is really important to bring up, because I've really been thinking about the four intelligences. All four of them are seeking to connect. They're all wanting to connect, both with one another and with us. And as human beings, we're sort of like the synapses between them that can connect them and bring them together. So I think we need to start incorporating all these intelligences and realizing they're truly present. People who know me know that one of my closest friends was Jane Goodall, and she and I spoke weekly about the world, the state of the world, and even like a couple of weeks before the forum started, just before she passed away, she and I talked about the State of the World Forum and what we believe was possible. And something that she and I have been working on and thinking about is creating an interspecies translator, a translator that a tree could speak to, or a dog could speak to, or, a consciousness from beyond the cosmos could speak to. And if you think about it, today we have all the components that are necessary to do that. We're having, human interaction with computers where we're putting like a chip in a person and we're able to communicate our thoughts to a computer and get it to start doing things. So we could take that same chip and put it in a tree or in a dog or in something else and utilize that ability to find out what something's saying. And one of the final conversations Jane and I said is, imagine what humanity might move towards or be like if we could hear what the trees were telling us. We could hear what the animals were telling us. We could hear what the rocks were telling us. And I think that we need to go there. I believe it's possible, and for sure it is. Obviously, when I started in 1950 as a kid, uh, you couldn't go into outer space. People laughed about that and thought it was crazy. My father was one of the top people working on the Apollo project that put the first men on the moon. And so in my lifetime, I've seen a crazy dream go from zero to we accomplished it. And when we're talking about artificial intelligence, I've been privileged in that I belonged to or was brought into a group called Gaia, the Global Artificial Intelligence Association. And Gaia started early on, bringing together a lot of the developers, Silicon Valley and such, to bring people like me and other people who were peacemakers and indigenous people with their wisdom to kind of pick our brains to create code to put into foundational coding for AI so that whatever everybody else puts in the future, those principles that we guide our lives on, trying to make a better world, would stay solid in AI. And I think that as human beings, as AI is kind of unleashing in crazy ways, we need to come up with laws and things to temper it and make sure that those principles, loving your neighbor, honoring diversity, all those kinds of things that keep things going well, and that there is enough and that there isn't us versus them are all programmed into it. I want to share something about what my version of humanity in the future will be, which is another little small story. And I like stories because it makes it easy for us to have giant ideas in simple ways. One day I went to a garage sale. There was an elderly woman and she was having a garage sale. And she had a long table with a whole bunch of jigsaw puzzles on it, maybe 30 or 40 jigsaw puzzles. And they were all $2.50 each. But on the end of the table was one jigsaw puzzle that was 10 cents. And that really bothered me. I was wondering, well, why is it only 10 cents for this one? So I asked the woman, and she did not answer me. Instead, she became defensive, and she said, all the pieces are there. I counted them. There's 500 pieces, and no pieces are missing. Every piece is there. There's 500 pieces. I said, well, why is it 10 cents then? And she said, because the lid's missing, and nobody knows what the picture is. And I had this big epiphany where I came to realize that that's what creation is like. Creation and what we all live in is like a giant jigsaw puzzle that we don't have the lid, so we can't see what the final picture looks like, but all the pieces are there. And each and every piece is fundamentally equally valuable. You can't take a piece that doesn't fit in the hole and put it in the hole. I've tried that. We've all probably tried to smash some puzzle piece in a jigsaw puzzle where it didn't really fit. But it made me realize that each and every one of us as human beings are like those puzzle pieces. We all carry something sacred that is attached to creation itself. And no one else has that sacred thing, only us. And in order to have a world that works right, we need to be able to honor the sacredness of each piece of the puzzle. In other words, honor each and every one of us. And so when I greet another human being for the first time, before I speak to them, I say in my head, you are sacred and you bring something we all need. And so I think that instead of trying to make a world where everyone is the same, there's a message in the puzzle and there's a message in the world itself. Diversity itself is sacred. You will not find two trees that look the same, two deer that look the same, two birds that are the same, two human beings are the same. As much as we'd like everything to be the same, they just aren't. So ultimately, I think that the state of the world right now is in a turmoil. There's been a lot of fighting and challenging and us versus them. But we're also in an exciting point in time. And the indigenous peoples have said in their prophecies for thousands of years that this time would come. And when this time came, that we would have a choice whether we want to dream a world where everyone is honored and connected to the original instructions, which, as one of my previous speakers said, is to honor and love everyone in creation itself, or if we're going to create a world where we're going to be us versus them and have turmoil. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you so, so much. It's a deep insight that we all are our own little puzzle piece. And even if we don't have the cover to tell us where we fit, that's the challenge of our life, is to discern that and come into harmony with the larger whole. So thank you so, so much for all you've done toward that end. And now, everyone, for our last presenter, as we begin our State of the World Forum, we want to bring in one of the Gen Zs, somebody who represents the emerging generation, Sulafa Victoria Grijalva. And I mentioned before, she's from Ecuador and spends her time between New York and Ecuador. And Sulafa, having heard from these elders and from the grandmothers as a young woman, uh, uh, just beginning your adulthood, how do you and your generation view all this? And I ask this because just in the news today in Bulgaria, there have been Gen Zs on the streets challenging the governments. And one of the things that have been captured in the news over the last year and a half, 18 months, 2 years, is the insurgency of the Gen Zs in protests, literally in countries around the world. So speak to us from that vantage point of not the elders, but from the youth. How do you view the state of the world?
Thank you, Jim. Well, thank you all for being here and for being willing to feel and not just think and analyze, but to really feel what these questions mean. I think it's important for all of us to have this disposition to feel because I think we all agree that we can't continue to understand the world with laws and policies, but we actually need to involve the heart and also understand the world through the memory of our bodies and our lands, wherever we are from. When I look at the state of the world, I see a planet that is speaking. And in some ways, the way that I've visualized this for myself is that a world healing its throat chakra. Bear with me. But essentially, I see that young people are at the forefront of that voice. Before I get into that, I want to say a small introduction of where my perspective is coming from and some context. As Jim mentioned, I am a young lawyer supporting social movements in New York City, but also Indigenous and farmer movements in Ecuador. And beyond the law, I am an EFT tapping practitioner. So that means that I explore how the energies of love and compassion can dissolve trauma in our bodies. So for me, I see a lot of things connected, in part because I definitely think they are. Before law school, I took a gap year where I decided to really delve into love and the ideas of love. Not the romanticized type that we see online or in music lyrics or anything like that, but I was really trying to understand something deeper, which is why, and this comes from a perspective of an environmentalist. I've always loved and felt close to nature just by the fact of being born and raised in Ecuador. So I wanted to understand why, as human beings, we have learned to exploit land as a practice, and how or why we've learned to exploit each other and ultimately exploit ourselves from within. I wanted to understand how consumerism and productivism, especially in the global north, so-called, have severed us from nature, from the present moment, and from meaningful connection with one another. And as I studied various authors and contemplated within, the realization to me became clear, and it was that our relationship with Mother Nature has been an abusive one. Rash Patel and Jason Moore describe how colonization reframed the earth as property, something to be owned, extracted, and drained. And it immediately clicked to me that relationships structured around ownership, extraction, depletion are inherently abusive. And it was a reckoning with the fact that that is how we relate to our land. And it's harmful for every life involved. Bell Hooks has been inspiring to me, teaching us that love and abuse can't coexist. And so the question to me became unavoidable. If we can't define love in our most intimate human relationships, how could we ever practice that with land and our environments, including urban ones? A culture that normalizes domination in the home will normalize domination in the market. Domination in the market becomes domination in the state, and domination in the state becomes domination of the soil as representative of our environments. And so basically, this tied up a lot of my inquiry, which to me was not abstract, even though it sounds like it. In my early 20s, I struggled in my own relationships. And in part, that was because I grew up witnessing domestic violence in the home. And so I had really gone into this quest because I wanted to understand what loving myself looked like and what loving others looked like. And also, I wanted clarity of what love was not so that I wouldn't replicate it in spaces I entered as I began my university years. And so the deeper I went, this truth was so loud, and it was that at the very least, love is far from domination anywhere. Not in relationships, not in governance, not in economics, not in our relationship with Earth. Domination just can't be a part of the practice of love. And so as a nature lover, I began to question the idea of sustainability next, right? And then pandemic hit, and I thought, well, do we really want to sustain the current state of the Earth? I think that was the first time that I questioned myself, the state of the world. And I think that after COVID, we saw that there are very particular groups of people, segments of society that crises sacrifices first. At the time, I was involved in mutual aid campaigns, supporting neighbors around me. New York was the epicenter of a lot of difficult grieving during that time. And what I saw was that the ones who carried the weight were elders, children, low-income Black and Brown communities, immigrants, tenants, Indigenous nations already living through centuries of pandemics, land theft, displacement, erasure, and that it would be completely crazy for us to sustain these ideas of normalcy. I didn't think that what was the world before pandemic was a world that worked. I think it works for a very few, but it didn't seem like it worked for most. And so what I saw was something in conflict, deeply, deeply out of alignment. And I thought, well, maybe the question is not sustaining that. I think that COVID really revealed the inequalities that have been there for a while. And instead, I thought maybe it's not about sustaining it, but maybe it's about regenerating and then sustaining that. And so recently, many people have begun looking to Gen Z as the generation that names what isn't working, the normalcy that no longer works, right? And I think that's true. I think this is the generation that names that the normal is not working, and it was maybe never working for most. And we're seeing it across the world, all the cries around Palestinian liberation, most of them led by young people, the cries against corruption and neoliberal ultra-right movements, Bangladesh, Nepal, Indonesia, the Philippines, in Morocco, Peru, Ecuador, Argentina, in Italy, Cameroon, Malaga, East Timor, and just this week, as Jim said, Bulgaria. Many of these uprisings are responses to the same patterns, at least in my perspective and my colleagues. State violence, nepotism, political clientelism. All is happening in different geographies, but ultimately these are the same rotten structures. With that said, I also want to be clear that I don't see this being new or unique to Gen Z. Young people have always led movements for justice, and history confirms this. Just 10 days ago, on December 4th, we commemorated the assassination of Fred Hampton, the chairman of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panthers Party. He was murdered by his government 56 years ago. And something that often gets missed is that he was only 21 years old. Hampton was a leader rooted in solidarity and care. He understood that liberation is built through collective survival rather than individual power. Even at such a young age, he organized across racial and class lines. He built multiracial coalitions, noble things like free breakfast programs, community health clinics, and spaces for political education. He and the peers that he surrounded himself with treated care itself as a revolutionary act, and one that was so threatening that the state had to assassinate. What feels different now, I think, about the Gen Z mass mobilization is not youth resistance. I think us youth have, as far as we get the resources to, have learned right from wrong, and we advocate for it. I think the difference now, though, is the scale and that it's happening simultaneously. I think it says a lot about our generation's refusal to be gaslit. I think about something recent also that happened this month with the Epstein files. The dominant narrative there frames someone as a lone villain, an anomaly. But what keeps surfacing again and again in different analyses that we're exposed to is that this was not an isolated figure. And luckily we have the information at our fingertips to really ground ourselves in that. As Anand Girindara says, this is not about one man, and I think Gen Z sees that clearly. It's about systems that shield elites, systems that silence survivors, launder violence through institutions who we, as young people, are told we should trust. As I see it, this was not a node, or rather this was a node. This was not a lone case. It was a node in a much larger network of corruption, political protection, financial power, and sexual violence. And again, I think the difference here is that Gen Z sees this clearly and is willing to speak up on it. We're not only rejecting individual perpetrators, in a sense, we're rejecting structures that allow abuse to persist without any sort of consequence. So the protests that we see, they respond to similar violence. As I mentioned, state violence and corruption mainly. And even though they're happening across geographies, I see them as not reactionary, but actually very diagnostic. It names corruption, not as a scandal, but as something showing a root cause. So this is why I say that the world is in some ways healing its throat chakra. For a long time, greed, the energy of greed, has governed our modern world system, which has been rooted in Eurocentric settler colonial projects that spread across the globe. Greed grew in direct opposition to love, solidarity, and reciprocity, as I see it. It extracted, it violated, it dominated, and abused both people and the land. Francis Bacon articulated this worldview plainly in 19th century when speaking about science and nature in the Americas. He described nature as something to be hunted, penetrated, driven into submission. And this language is by no means accidentally violent. It's part of the project that has taken root since the beginning of our state of the world. And this is the language that is used to justify domination over bodies, especially womb-bearing and feminine identifying bodies. I don't see that this logic ever disappeared. I actually see that, as my colleagues also see, that it institutionalized itself in the systems that, again, we are told we should trust. Greed inherent to the settler colonialism project and the systems of white supremacy that it produced has continued to generate trauma that our bodies carry and that our lands carry. And this is also something that Gen Z makes very clear. When truth is suppressed for a long time, it does not vanish, it only accumulates. And when it finally emerges, it does so loudly. Every time we speak the truth, even when it costs our comfort or belonging, we bring oxygen back to a suffocated world. We become breath and we become vibration. And little by little, I believe that that is how the world right now is clearing its throat chakra. So if the world has been blocked by corruption, by violence, by silence, by fear, then I see these movements not as chaos. They are actually circulation returning. And so I see the state of the world now as restoring a society's capacity to hear truth, to respond to harm, to transform feedback into true structural change. I don't think that a healed world is a quiet world. And I think this is why young people keep going, even when we are dismissed, criminalized, or labeled extremists or radicals. We're advocating for basic things like safe housing, healthy food, and dignity for all. Even when the media and our governments call us radicals or terrorists for defending land, opposing genocide, protecting Indigenous life, demanding economic justice, and insisting on collective care, we carry on despite loneliness, despite repression, despite organized money and organized power. Because we are discovering something old and dangerous, which is that organized people are more powerful than organized wealth. And that, I think, more than anything, is why the world is speaking right now and why we're seeing all the outbursts of protests. I am still learning how to see the world fully and how to hold a true cosmovision, and it's been wonderful to be able to hear everybody that has spoken today, and I'm excited to hear more of the wisdom in the next coming days. But for now, what I wanted to share that I have clarity on is that human beings have always been shaped by two forces, fear and love. Fear limits, love liberates. Fear hoards, love shares. Fear dominates, and love regenerates. And right now, we're living inside the dictionary definition of a dystopia. And this is why sustainability to my generation does not feel like enough. Because we can't sustain a system, rather we're not willing to sustain a system that is structurally violent, extractive, and collapsing under its own contradictions. This is why Gen Z and those from older generations who never abandoned solidarity movements and who actually have taught us and mentored us are searching relentlessly for alternatives. Not reforms, not patches, but really true alternatives. New ways of relating to one another, new ways of relating to land, new ways of relating to money, and what we understand as property, both in the legal and the cultural sense. Because we can't keep building solutions atop an architecture designed around injustice, which is very clear to our generation. An architecture rooted in colonial property regimes, market logics that have not only shaped our economies, but our morals, our cultures, and our sense of what is possible. I think property as we currently understand it is a threshold issue. It stands between us and a genuinely ecocentric paradigm, one that recognizes life as relational, independent, and alive. Land becomes the central site of struggle because this is where everything converges. Indigenous rights, the rights of nature, the colonial logic that underpins Western development, extraction, and notions of progress and abundance. And this brings us back to the paradox that defines our time, that the more we have owned, the more we have dominated, it hasn't necessarily led to more belonging. And that's why a lot of us in our generation feel lonely. Ownership hasn't given us a sense of security. It hasn't given us fulfillment. It's actually made us anxious, isolated, and you've seen that maybe as disconnected from other generations. What we're facing is not only an ecological crisis, I think it is a relational crisis, and we need a new ethic for how we can relate to land and how we can relate to another. I really resonated with the ethics of care shared by Anne. And so this is the conclusion that now shapes everything I do, and I think in some ways it shapes my colleagues, that we don't need sustainability, that we can't sustain what we have in front of us, that the current state of the world needs regeneration of our soils, of our rivers, especially of our leadership, of our belonging, of trust, and in my view, also a regeneration of our capacity to love. I don't think that the future is extractive. I think the future is cooperative. I think it is a future rooted in solidarity, and that's what a lot of my colleagues resonate with. a future that we achieve through alternative decolonial forms of rematriation with land, through care, reciprocity, and collective stewardship. And a lot of us are willing to get involved in projects like that. So I guess what matters now is not how the world began. I think this is an inflection point, and that although we see the world is breaking, we also see that there are many more of us that are willing to reveal what's not working through our voice. I think that the key here is that these protests, these uprisings, these voices rising around the world, they are the symptom, but not the disease. They're not a divergence. They're the diagnostic of what is not working. And I think that healing the throat chakra means that eventually we must listen to these messages beneath the noise, and that will lead us to addressing the root causes. I think also that the questions we need to ask ourselves have to go back to to go back to choice. Will we regenerate or will we repeat? Will we choose love or will we continue to choose dominance? Will we decolonize or will we perpetuate colonial and market logics into our very own collapse? I don't think at this point the world is asking for neutrality. I think, if anything, the Gen Z protests show us that there are many of us that are willing to take a very firm position for what we feel is just. And so solutions rooted in profit extraction and domination will not suffice, and we will keep speaking up. It's a time that's asking us for courage. And I think that courage can also be fun. It's a courage to reimagine, to dream beyond the limits of what we've been told is possible. And it's asking for boundless vision. So I just want to leave with the question of what truly matters. And it is, what world will you choose to bring into being starting now? Will you love it enough to regenerate it? Or will you shy away and perpetuate?
Thank you, Sulafa. Thank you very much for your fierce love today and your extraordinary clarity in what your generation demands of us. So bravo for all that you're doing in the world. I really thank you for that. Especially as an old guy from the 60s who was on the barricades. I remember Fred Hampton. I worked with the Black Panthers. And I remember hearing the news that he had been shot. So thank you for bringing that in. I'd kind of forgotten. There's so many people that have been sacrificed along the way. So thank you for bringing Fred's courage to our deliberations today. And you and your generation embody the same courage. So thank you. It gives us all hope. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce for his comment on all this, Robert Arnold. Each year during the State of the World Forum, we had a poet laureate. We had David White and one of the members of the Moody Blues and various people that spoke to us.
I've got to call the airline.
Robert is going to
change my flight if I can. Otherwise, I'm going to miss the end.
Maybe you could mute whoever that is, Georg. Robert's going to be sharing his poetry several more times during our deliberations because the poet oftentimes carries more power than those of us who use prose. So Robert, please provide a final comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. My name is Robert. I am a writer. I'm going to start out with a little bit of prose, and then I've got I'll share some poetry for today. This is about our great disconnection. There is a story modern civilization tells itself, and it is a story of ascent. We rose from the soil and learned to stand upright, learned to reason, learned to dominate our environment, and in doing so became fully human. The past is cast as primitive and the future is framed as escape. Nature is something we've survived, not something we belong to. And this story comforts us and it justifies our excess. It frames destruction as collateral rather than consequence, but it is not true, or at least not complete, and what it leaves out has cost us dearly. For most of human existence, survival depended on intimacy. To live was to know the land, not abstractly, but bodily. Wind patterns mattered, soil mattered, water mattered. Migration followed seasons and not borders. Life was not divided into sacred and secular because everything carried weight. A successful hunt was not only sustenance, it was relationship. Death was not failure, it was transformation. Among the Sands people of southern Africa, the earth was not passive ground beneath your feet, but a living field of memory, and footprints were read as stories. Movement itself was a language shared between human and land. Among the Aboriginal Australians, the dreaming did not describe a distant mythic past, but an ongoing present, and the land itself was alive with ancestral presence, and to walk it carelessly was to wound history itself. These cultures were not naive, they were precise. Their spiritual frameworks were not escapism, they were ecological literacy encoded as meaning. And the break began when surplus appeared. Agriculture allowed storage, storage allowed accumulation, accumulation allowed hierarchy, and hierarchy demanded justification. And that justification produced cosmologies that elevated some above others, humans above animals, men above women, rulers above the ruled, and eventually the civilized above savages. Land then ceased to be our kin and became property. An empire formalized its rupture. Roman roads did not merely connect cities, they carved dominance into the earth. Forests fell not because they were needed, but because conquest demanded visibility and control. Rivers were redirected, mountains were mined, and life was reorganized around extraction rather than reciprocity. Religion, too, changed shape. Early animalistic and earth-centered spiritualities emphasized balance and cycles and humility. But as empire grew, so did the need for divine endorsement. And gods ascended into the sky. The earth was demoted. Dominion replaced stewardship. And creation became something given rather than something shared. And not that this is an indictment of faith itself, but of how faith has been bent to serve power. The Enlightenment sharpened the separation further, and reason was elevated as defining human trait. Nature became mechanism. Descartes split mind from body, subject from object. The world became something to analyze, dissect, and master. This produced extraordinary advances, but it also introduced a fatal abstraction, that man stood outside the world looking in. And Jean-Jacques Rousseau sensed the danger, and his natural man was a call not to abandon civilization, but a warning about what happens when social complexity outruns moral grounding. Civilization, he argued, did not automatically produce virtue. In fact, it often produced alienation and a condition where humans were surrounded by others and yet profoundly alone. And when Henry David Thoreau retreated to Walden Pond, it was not to escape responsibility. He went there to remember it. He stripped life down to the essentials, not because simplicity was purity, but because excess had become a form of forgetting. Walden Pond was an act of resistance against a society that had mistaken motion for meaning. And even still, the machinery accelerated. And industrialization completed that transformation. Work became divorced from outcome. Food became unrecognizable. Time became segmented. Human beings became units of labor. Nature became resource. Distance grew from soil and from consequence and from one another. Today we live inside those abstractions. We eat food grown by people we never see on land we will never touch. We drink water from pipes whose sources we cannot name, and we experience seasons through the screens on our phones, and we mourn ecosystems through headlines. And the psychological toll of this disconnection is now impossible to ignore because loneliness is not a personal failure, it's a structural outcome. Anxiety is not individual weakness, it is the nervous system reacting to a world that no longer feels coherent or safe. And depression is not simply chemical imbalance, it is grief without ritual. And many of our indigenous traditions understood grief as communal and ecological. Among the Haudenosaunee, decisions were made with the seventh generation in mind, not because of abstract ethics, but because the future was understood as alive and present. And to act without regard for what came next was not only irresponsible, it was immoral. Albert Camus described the modern condition as absurd, the human longing for meaning confronting a silent universe, but perhaps that universe was never silent. Perhaps we were simply stopped listening, and the absurdity may not lie in existence itself, but in our refusal to participate in it. Ecological grief is not separate from personal despair. They are the same wound viewed from different angles. When forests burn, something ancient inside us recoils. When species vanish, a word disappears from the human story, and when the land is reduced to numbers, people are reduced to functions. We cannot solve this crisis with better branding or cleaner technology alone. We must confront the deeper truth. The environmental collapse we face mirrors an internal collapse of meaning, belonging, and humility. We do not lose the connection to nature. We lose connection to ourselves, and until we face that honestly, every solution remains incomplete. We cannot heal the planet until we admit this, that the wound is within us. And I've written this in a little more poetry. And this is called Our Disconnection. We did not fall from the world. We were not cast out. We walked away quietly with pockets full of clever little tools and mouths full of new names for old things. Once the earth knew us by our footprints, and once the river recognized our thirst, once the wind spoke our childhood names, and we answered without fear. We said thank you before taking. We said forgive us before cutting. We said may this be enough, and we meant it. Now we say this is mine and call it progress. So bless the hands that once knew how to listen, and bless the eyes that once read the sky like scripture. Bless the feet that understood the long memory of the dirt, and bless the breath that remembered it was borrowed. We've been taught the world was silent, that stone was dead, that trees were furniture waiting to happen, that water was a resource instead of a relative. So we've learned to conquer what once carried us. And we've built walls where once there were songs. We've built engines where there had been patience. We built clocks and forgot that the seasons were already keeping time for us. And something in us broke, not loudly, but the way bones break under snow, the way animals go quiet before a storm. Bless the elders that warned us. Bless the stories we were too busy to hear. Bless the languages we were allowed to starve. Bless the children who still feel the ache, but do not yet know its name. Because this loneliness we wear is like a second skin. It's not new. It is ancient. It is a grief of forgetting who we belong to. We've tried to replace belonging with ownership and tried to trade reverence for efficiency, tried to solve the mystery of living instead of bowing to it. We called the earth it and have wondered why we felt so alone, but the old prayers are still breathing in the dirt under our fingernails, and in the way fire still asks for care, and the way water still forgives until it can't. May we remember that we are not above the world, but within it. May we remember that breath is a treaty. May we remember that every meal is a ceremony. May we remember that the land does not need us to save it, but it does need us to stop pretending we are not part of its body. Bless this forgetting. And not because it's good, but because it can end. Bless this moment of recognition, and bless the ache that wakes us. Bless the long road back to listening. And maybe we learn again to walk gently enough that the earth recognizes us when we return. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Powerful language both in terms of your prose and your poetry. We look forward to hearing more. So thank you so much for everything you're doing to illuminate consciousness in our time.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Like the Gen Zs, your poetry is a revolutionary act. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. We're now going to bring our opening session to a close. It's going to be in 3 parts. We're going to begin with a letter that we received today from the Oracle of Tibet on behalf of the Dalai Lama. And I want to thank all of those who participated in bringing this to pass. I want to specifically thank Jackie Miller and Lama Tenzin, who's in India, and in Dharamsala as we speak, for everything that they did to enable us to have the blessings of the Oracle, who is, as you all know, a very close advisor to His Holiness himself. Also, as we close, I want to just thank a couple of people that are very important to note. I want to thank Michelle Sant-Sulpice and Mary Stanton. I also want to thank Harriet Crosby. Their generosity made it possible for this forum to take place, and for us over the last year to build the team, the infrastructure, the social media, the website. So Michelle and Mary and Harriet, thanks so much for your support. I also want to thank our team. We have an extraordinary team of individuals who have come together with such harmony and such purpose, and almost devoid of any hostilities or conflicts. It's been pure pleasure, everyone, working with our team to bring the State of the World Forum to pass. So we're going to now turn to the Oracle of Tibet, and then when the letter from the Oracle is done, Fred Johnson, who's a Sufi master and mystic, as part of the International Order of Sufis, will just bring vocalization to our proceedings today. And then when Fred completes his singing, we'll hear from Auntie Puna from Hawaii, who will give us our final blessing. And then we'll see you all tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for our first of 2 plenaries for tomorrow. And then we will go from there. But thank you, everyone, for joining us. And now Tom Eddington is going to read the letter from the Oracle, followed by Fred, and then Auntie Puna.
To better serve you. So please listen.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. So as Jim indicated, we were blessed to receive this letter this morning from the Oracle. He writes, "Dear esteemed friends and participants from more than various parts of the world gathered for the State of the World Forum. I wish to express my profound appreciation for the exceptional vision and unwavering dedication. At this critical juncture in human history, the message conveyed by the formless protectors is both clear and urgent. All sentient beings, human and animal alike, the living earth itself, and the emerging intelligences are now arising among us, call out for our care, responsibility, and protection. Compassion can no longer remain a noble aspiration alone. It must be recognized as the essential force capable of healing the harm we've caused and of safeguarding the future we are collectively shaping. In this context, I'm reminded of the timeless guidance of His Holiness the Dalai Lama who has consistently emphasized the oneness of humanity as the true foundation of world peace. His Holiness has said, we must recognize that all human beings are the same. We all want happiness and do not want suffering. Differences of nationality, faith, or culture are secondary. The oneness of humanity is the foundation of genuine peace. His Holiness has also repeatedly called for harmony among religious traditions, especially in times of global uncertainty, reminding us all major religious traditions carry the same message: love, compassion, forgiveness, tolerance, and self-discipline. The purpose of religion is not to create division, but to help develop these good human qualities. When religions respect one another, the world becomes more peaceful. May these noble teachings inspire the Forum to rise above division and fear and to work together in mutual respect and understanding, recognizing that our shared humanity is far greater than any difference or belief or tradition. May this forum serve as a space for deep listening, principled action, and boundless kindness. Regardless of our individual paths or places, may we remember that when love is chosen over indifference and wisdom over fear, the protectors rejoice and the world moves closer toward harmony and light. I hold each of you in my prayers and heartfelt aspirations. Let us proceed together as one human family, committed to caring for all who breathe, all who feel, and all who hold hope for the future, with profound respect, love, and compassion for all beings.
I breathe with you, brothers, sisters, we the children of creation. Thee who created all in this perfect moment now, as we gather, may we be reminded that we in every breath are connected to thee, to all of creation. In this perfect moment now, may we begin this journey of oneness, embracing all our relatives, all creation's relatives, breathing and knowing that this breath that we share, every breath a gift from Creator. Mother, forgive us for stumbling and forgetting that we in every breath are blessed by you. May we, as we gather now, breathe in and embrace embrace the wisdom of the grandmothers, the wisdom of the elders, the wisdom in this contemporary place now, knowing that we can't know where we're going if we forget who we are and where we've been. May we, joined in this breath of being, from this moment forward, be committed to be and mirror into the world that which is for the greater good of all. With every breath, in every moment, from this moment now, may the pure vibration of every breath we take be committed to look into each other's eyes, to know and feel and love that we together journey, but by the grace of creation, our Creator, by all names known and realized, and we are united as one with every breath, in every moment. May this gathering be a beginning of a true journey together for the greater good of allness, in the wisp and wonder of the gift of breath itself. So may we be as one all throughout the earth in this perfect moment. Now
Aloha, everyone. Blessings to all those that have joined in creating this blanket of peace for the world to enjoy. Prophecy and our kupuna have put into our hands through the different elders that have come before me a direction in the spirit of aloha. Aloha that is for you and I. Akahai, to be kind. Lokahi, to be a family. Olu olu, to be able to hear and understand diversity. Ha'aha'a, to be humble, to understand that we do not have all the answers, that the answers are like that puzzle that was spoken about earlier, that we all have a piece. And the very last part that identifies us as individuals is ahonui, which is patience, to be able to care for the things that are so very important in the life that we lead as individuals. Our kupuna and Tipilahi Paki brought another aloha in her translation. And it says, Alamai kalahui, let us be one world. Alamai kalahui, laula I kaulana. Let us look at all that has happened. What is the legacy that we leave for all those that come after us? When we say that Alamai kalahui, laula I kaulana, o mai kalehulehu, o mai kalehulehu, understand who we are, know why, and more important, where we're going. Like our kupuna, they set things up 7 generations in the past so that we would find it and be able to have a path going forward. O mai kalehulehu, look at the history that was given to us. Ha'aheo e na Hawaii, ha'aheo be the ha, which we all share. The why, the birth waters that we come from our mothers, and the Ionalani, that universal good. So when we speak about Hawaii, the breath and the waters of man who is kind, this is being Hawaiian. It is not the islands. It does not belong to the islands. It is the world in this ocean of time that we live. So I offer to you, please take this moment to breathe into your hands the breath, lift it up, share it with the world. In one breath, we are one aloha. Alamai kalahui laulai kaulana, o mai kalehulehu, ha'aheo e na Hawaii. Ano ai no me ke aloha. With love, we are the people of the heart. Aloha. Ahuiho.